I found my husband's secret group chat called Keeping Her Dumb. If you had asked me a few months ago, I would have said my marriage was fine. Good even. Not storybook, not movie-level romance, but solid. We had routines. He'd kiss my forehead before work. I'd make his coffee just how he liked it. We had quiet dinners, lazy Sunday mornings. We weren't exciting, but we were consistent. And in a world that felt like it was always unraveling, that felt like love. I used to brag about him to friends. He's just not the emotional type I'd explain when they said he seemed cold. But he shows up, and that meant everything to me. We've been together for 7 years, married for 5. I believe in him the way a rescue dog believes in its first kind owner, fully, blindly. That's why when I found his old phone in the garage, I wasn't snooping. He was away on a short work trip 3 days out of state. I'd been meaning to clean the garage anyway. It had turned into a graveyard of random junk, old gym bags, tangled cords, Christmas wreaths we never hung. Tucked into a box labeled electrical, under dead chargers and tangled earbuds, was his old iPhone. Cracked screen, dusty case. I almost tossed it in the e-waste pile. But something made me pause. Maybe it was the way it looked like it had been shoved in with purpose. Hidden, not forgotten. I brought it inside and plugged it in. It wasn't charged. I didn't think much of it. Figured I'd wipe it clean and drop it at a recycling bin later. Maybe donate it. It powered on after an hour. The passcode, his birthday. Easy. He never thought I'd need to guess. At first, I didn't see much. No social apps, no emails, just a few leftover photos, scattered notes, and one pinned group chat at the top of the messages app. Keeping her dumb. I almost laughed. I thought it was a joke. Fantasy football, maybe? Some kind of sarcastic group name about a work client or silly inside joke. My husband was never creative with titles, but I tapped it, and my world split clean down the center. It was a family group chat, not friends, not co-workers, family. His mother, his sister, his brother, a cousin, and him. Years worth of messages. Not all had loaded, some were too old, but what I saw was enough. The tone at first was flippant. She still thinks I'm working late. LOL, she bought that whole therapy thing unreal. Let her think she's special. It didn't hit me right away. It was like watching strangers mock someone else until it wasn't. They ran polls, real ones, votes. How long until she figures it out? Will she try for a baby soon? Should we let her? I didn't understand what let her meant. Then I read further, and I froze. His mother. If she gets pregnant, game over. You'll be stuck. Don't be stupid. His sister. You've got her trained. Don't screw it up now. And then I saw the pictures. Photos of me sleeping. Photos of me cooking. Snoring like a swamp creature again. She actually thinks this sad dinner is cute. That dinner, I made it after a 10-hour shift. I tried to surprise him with a Pinterest recipe. He said it was delicious, kissed me on the cheek. They all laughed. Then I saw the one that gutted me. A picture of me from Thanksgiving mouth mid-laugh. Captioned, she thinks she belongs here. Underneath a reply from him, she's like a rescue dog. Feed her, pet her, she thinks you're God. I stopped breathing. I couldn't even cry. The betrayal was too big, too coordinated. This wasn't just a cruel comment. It was an operation. They had watched me live and taken notes. For hours, I sat on the bedroom floor with that phone in my lap, just reading, scrolling, reading, breathing shallow. And then I got up, not to scream, not to cry, to print. I found a 24-hour print shop across town. I stayed up all night compiling screenshots. I labeled them, organized them, cropped them for clarity, arranged them by theme mockery, strategy, pregnancy, dehumanization. The next morning, I returned home, and I wallpapered the truth. The kitchen, the hallway, the living room walls, his bathroom mirror, the fridge, his side of the bed, the coffee maker, even the TV, anywhere his eyes might land. And in the center of the living room wall, just beneath our wedding photo, I taped one phrase, bold printed in black, keeping her dumb. I packed a bag. No note, no warning, no rage. I walked out, and I didn't answer his calls for a week. But I wasn't alone when I returned. When I unlocked the front door, exactly 7 days later, the paper ghosts were still there. Some corners had curled. A few pages dangled from strips of tape like molting skin. He had tried to rip them down, rage in the torn edges, panic in the uneven gaps, but he'd stopped halfway as if the walls were stronger than his arms. He was on the couch. He looked smaller somehow, like he'd been shrunk in a too-hot wash. Red eyes, unshaven. That familiar cologne gone sour from old sweat. He stood when he heard the latch click. Hey, he said like a question. Hey. I stepped aside. Marcus walked in behind me. For a second, my husband didn't recognize him. I watched it happen. The blink, the frown, the almost smile people do when they're pretending they remember a face. Then he looked at my last name, embossed on the leather folder in Marcus's hand, the same last name as mine, and everything inside him clenched. You, he said to Marcus, but it came out thin. From what, 6 years ago? The dinner. Marcus didn't bother to nod. Good morning? I didn't speak. I didn't hug or cry or demand explanations. Silence is a tool if you hold it steady. I walked past my husband into the kitchen and opened the drawer that held our passports, insurance cards, Social Security originals, every document. Couples promised they'll organize this weekend. I'd memorized the exact spot of every envelope the week I was gone. I handed the file to Marcus. My husband's voice went brittle. Why is he here? To witness, I said. The first words I'd given him in 7 days tasted clean in my mouth. Marcus took out a neat stack of color-coded dividers. We're going to go through some things he said, tone even, hands quiet. It'll be quick if you don't posture. He postured anyway. This is insane. Why are you doing this? He gestured vaguely at the walls at me, at his ruined week. He didn't point at himself. Marcus opened a slim laptop and slid a printed index across the island group chat archive financial activity communications timeline. Quiet words, sober fonts, no drama, just gravity. We mirrored the messages Marcus said. They're preserved, time-stamped, redundant backup. He tapped the top of the page without looking up. Don't worry, the context is included. Your jokes didn't travel alone. My husband flinched like the paper cut him. It was just talk. The living room wall replied on his behalf. She's like a rescue dog. He stared at that line as if it might apologize for him. Sit, Marcus said. He sat. I stood. I wanted to feel the floor under both feet. I wanted to watch him from a height I hadn't had in years. Marcus began with the money. He doesn't accuse, he documents. One by one, he laid out screenshots of joint accounts, small transfers to a separate checking, less than $100 a month, steady as a metronome. Over 3 years, little pebbles had become a pile. Then the Venmo notes, storage cover me, don't label this. Then the PayPal activity, drip, drip, drip. Side account? Marcus asked mildly. My husband swallowed. Savings. For whom Marcus asked? No answer. The kitchen clock carved the silence into hard little seconds. I remember the day years ago when my husband convinced me we should put the house in my name. Better for taxes, he'd said. Your credit is cleaner. I believed him. I thought he was protecting us. Now I understood sometimes you trip a trap by accident and still land outside of it. Marcus kept going. We'll be freezing joint funds today, he said. Her salary is already elsewhere. We'll also be requesting your employment verification. For what he said, voice pitching high. For whatever comes next, Marcus said. We're fond of records. My husband dragged his hands over his face. This is ridiculous. Look, I know I messed up. But that chat, it was stupid. It wasn't real. I let my eyes travel deliberately over the house he'd tried to scrub clean and failed. Let her think she's special. Don't be stupid. If she gets pregnant, game over. Paper truths hung like warning labels on a life I had mistaken for safe. What part wasn't real? I asked finally. The photos of me sleeping the poles, or calling me a dog that needed training. He flinched again. It got out of hand. My mom? Marcus raised a finger without looking up. No triangulating. You're an adult. My mother pushed. Adults choose, Marcus said. Still even. Still quiet. My husband's chest rose and fell too fast. I love you, he said suddenly, like throwing a heavy object at a locked door. I do. You know I do. Love isn't a mop. It doesn't clean what it didn't spill. I slid a single envelope from my pocket and set it on the counter between us. Inside was a crisp stack of screenshots he hadn't seen in print yet, his private DMs with his cousin. The ones his sister sent me from a burner after I left. The ones where he joked about planting the baby early to slow her down. He saw the top line and went very still. He stopped. The fridge hummed. The coffee maker clicked as it cooled. Ordinary appliances doing ordinary work, while extraordinary wrongness settled in their kitchen? You wanted me pregnant because you thought it would make me slower, I said, voice level. Less likely to ask questions. Easier to manage. That's not a joke. That's a plan. He opened his mouth closed. It opened it again. I didn't mean, you meant it enough to write it, I said. You meant it enough to send it. Marcus, already 3 steps ahead, slid a slim, labeled USB across the counter toward him. Mirror of the chat. Financials, the full index. You'll receive the formal letter through counsel. Counsel, he echoed, panicking around the new word like it was a bee in the room. Lawyers, Marcus said, grown-ups. My husband looked at me then, past the papers and the walls, past Marcus. He looked for the version of me that said yes to forehead kisses and dull routines, the girl who apologized for burning toast and laughed at herself so nobody else would have to. She wasn't home. He tried a softer mask. Where were you? He asked, and for a second, I could hear the old instinct in me trying to answer kindly, to cushion the fall, to make his landing gentle and mine hard. I let the instinct pass through me, and out like an old ghost that didn't know the new rules. I was remembering, I said, what I was like before I met a committee of people who voted on my worth. He recoiled like the word committee had teeth. Marcus shut the folder with a soft final click. Here's how this works, he said. No shouting, no midnight showdowns. You'll receive instructions by email about assets and communications. Do not contact her directly. Do not contact her at work. Do not contact her at all until counsel is assigned. If you try to remove funds, we'll know. If you try to erase devices, we already have them mirrored. The best thing you can do here is nothing. Do you understand? My husband nodded because nodding was the only thing left that made him feel like he was moving. On the way out, I paused in the doorway and looked back at the living room wall. A page had fallen from the center, leaving a ragged white square where the words keeping her dumb had been. I imagined the moment it slipped in the night and landed silently on the floor. Gravity has perfect aim. Clean it up or leave it, I said. Either way, it's your house to look at, not mine. He reached out like he might catch my sleeve, but his hand stopped in the air as if the room had turned to glass between us. Marcus opened the door. Daylight rushed in, plain and bright and wonderfully indifferent. We stepped into it. Marcus's apartment was small, but it was the kind of small that felt intentional. Every surface was neat. The couch didn't sag. The fridge was organized, labeled even. I hadn't lived with order in years, not the kind you can feel like a pulse in the walls. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe without listening for the sound of someone else's footsteps. He didn't ask questions that first night. He poured me water, pointed at the guest room, and said, "Sleep. We'll talk when the sun's up." I didn't sleep. I lay there with my hands folded over my stomach, staring at the ceiling until it went from black to gray. When the light finally came, it wasn't gentle. It felt like interrogation. The next morning, Marcus brought coffee to the table and set his laptop between us. He had already built folders color-coded, labeled time-stamped. He had a mind like a courtroom, sharp and surgical. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't roll his eyes. He just showed me piece by piece how to turn betrayal into evidence. "This isn't about revenge," he said, sliding papers toward me. "It's about record. You don't need to scream when the facts do it louder." I nodded, though part of me wanted to scream anyway. To burn their words in a bonfire outside his mother's house, to force them all to choke on the smoke. But that's the thing about rage, it burns quick and then it leaves you hollow. Silence lasts longer. For days, Marcus and I worked. Bank statements, employment records, tax filings. He traced small transfers like a detective following breadcrumbs. Every deposit into that hidden account was marked, dated, totaled. He kept his tone calm, but his pen moved with precision, carving my life into sections before discovery after discovery, and everything in between. By the third night, he looked up from the screen. "Do you want the whole picture?" I almost said no, but the part of me that used to say no to pain was the same part that believed love excused cruelty. I wasn't that woman anymore. "Yes," I said. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were the messages his sister had forwarded, the ones I hadn't seen before. My husband typing in private. "She's asking too many questions. Time to slow her down. Plant the baby early." The words were clinical, detached, like he was describing farm equipment, not a wife. My stomach twisted, not just at the thought of what he'd written, but at the faint nausea that had been haunting me for weeks. I'd been late, but I'd blamed stress, new routines, skipped meals. Now the denial cracked. The next morning, I made an appointment with my doctor. I didn't tell Marcus why. I just drove across town and sat in the waiting room with a clipboard on my lap, filling out forms with hands that shook more than I wanted them to. The doctor was kind efficient. She confirmed what I already suspected. Pregnant. The word hit like a blow and a blessing at once. My chest ached, but my throat stayed dry. I walked out of that office knowing two things. His mother had been right when she guessed it would happen soon. She had no idea how wrong she was about what it meant for me. That night, Marcus and I sat in silence for a long time. He finally asked, "You want to tell him?" "Eventually," I said, "but not the way he expects." Because that was the truth. In his world, pregnancy was a chain. In mine, it was leverage. I didn't cry that night either. I thought maybe I should have. Maybe normal women sobbed over pink lines and shattered futures. But tears felt wasted on a man who saw me as a strategy. Instead, I lay awake thinking about the word trap. His family thought a baby would trap me. He thought it would slow me down. But here I was, planning with more clarity than I'd had in years. The silence was my trap, and he was the one caught inside it. For the next week, I ignored his calls. Every voicemail was a new mask, the apologetic husband, the desperate lover, the victim of his cruel family. He cycled through them, like a man trying on costumes waiting to see which one fit. I didn't call back. Instead, I wrote an email. Simple, cold, no emotion for him to feed on. Subject line Tuesday, 3:15 p.m., body ultrasound. That was it. No greeting, no explanation. He showed up. Of course he did. When the screen lit up in the exam room, when the grainy shape appeared, and the sound filled the space like a secret heartbeat, he cried. Big, messy tears. He grabbed my hand like we were still us. Like we were the couple who laughed at burnt toast and believed in Sunday mornings. But that couple was a ghost. I didn't pull my hand away. Not then, but I didn't hold on either. Afterward, in the waiting room, I asked one question. Quiet, precise. Did they know? He didn't pretend confusion. He didn't ask what I meant. He nodded slowly. Not everything he said, but yeah. That was the moment the last thread snapped. They had mocked me while knowing this life was already inside me. They had voted on my worth while I carried their strategy. I realized then I wasn't carrying his legacy. I was carrying my own. And for the first time, I felt calm. Because silence isn't weakness. It's planning. And my silence had only just begun. He cried like the ultrasound was redemption. I watched him through the corner of my eye, the way his shoulders shook, the way he clutched his chest, as if this heartbeat had erased every word he and his family ever typed. "Everything changes now," he whispered. "This is our second chance." I didn't answer. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic, and the monitor still hummed with proof of life. I wondered if the nurse could tell that my silence wasn't awe. It was calculation. On the drive home, he kept reaching for my hand. He gripped, I released. He gripped again. By the third time, I let him hold it. Not because I wanted to, but because I wanted him comfortable enough to keep talking. And he did. He poured it out, the version of himself that sounded like he'd just walked out of a movie about redemption. "I'll be better," he promised. "You'll see. I'll cut them off, my mom, my sister, all of them. I just need you. Just us. This baby is what we needed. Needed. Like a tool. Like an anchor." When we parked, I turned and asked the question that had been sitting in my throat and since the gel hit my skin. Did they know? The smile faltered. His jaw flexed. He didn't even ask me to clarify. He knew. Not everything he said quietly. But yeah, enough. Enough. I could almost hear his mother's voice layered under his. If she gets pregnant, game over. She'll stay. She won't leave now. He tried to backpedal. It wasn't like that. They just joked. You know how my family is? They talk too much. It doesn't mean anything. It meant everything. In that moment, I realized the child inside me was never supposed to be a gift. Not to them, not even to him. I was supposed to be slowed down, contained. A bird with clipped wings singing in their cage. I said nothing. My silence made him nervous. He filled it with apologies. I'm not my mother. You know that, right? I don't hate you. I love you. But love that requires humiliation isn't love. It's control. That night, he tried to make it normal. He cooked dinner badly, oversalted pasta, poured wine for himself, water for me. He sat across from me at the table, watching me with wide, desperate eyes. You're glowing already, he said. No, I thought. I was haunted. When he went to bed, I stayed up in the kitchen staring at the ultrasound photo they'd given me. A blur of gray, a pulse of light. Life. I pressed it against the fridge and thought about the wall I had once covered with screenshots. What would I tape up this time? What truth would I leave behind when I walked away for good? I didn't know yet, but I knew I wouldn't let him or his family claim this child as their victory. In the morning, he tried tenderness again. He set a mug of decaf coffee in front of me, kissed the crown of my head. His performance was so thorough, it almost convinced me if I blurred my memory enough. Almost. But memory is stubborn. It doesn't forget being called a rescue dog. When he left for work, Marcus called. His voice was steady anchoring. How did it go? He knows, I said. Good. Let him sweat. Don't explain. Don't soothe. Just let him live inside what he made. I closed my eyes and let the words settle. That was the strategy. Not fire, not screaming, not confrontation. Let him rot slowly in the quiet, every sound in the house, echoing back his own words. 2 days later, I received an email from his sister, the burner account again. She wrote, "You're stronger than we thought." I almost deleted it without opening. But curiosity won. Inside were screenshots, private messages between my husband and his cousin. Messages worse than the group chat. She's asking too many questions. A baby will slow her down. Get it done before she gets ideas. It wasn't love. It wasn't even mistake. It was strategy. He hadn't just stumbled into cruelty. He had calculated it. He had timed it. That night, I sat in Marcus's apartment again, the ultrasound in one hand, the screenshots in the other. My brother said nothing, just waited. Finally, I whispered. He tried to trap me. Marcus shook his head slowly. No. He tried to, but he failed. You're not the one in the trap. He is. I looked at the photo again, the blur of gray, the faint heartbeat. For the first time I smiled, not because of him, but in spite of him. They thought pregnancy would chain me. They thought motherhood would make me too desperate to leave. But I was already gone, and silence was still my weapon. The message came at 2:11 a.m. My phone buzzed once on the nightstand. For a moment, I thought it might be him again, one of his endless apologies wrapped in fresh desperation. But it wasn't his number. It was a blank Instagram account. No photo, no name, just a single line of text blinking on the screen. You're stronger than any of us thought. I stared at it for a long time, my pulse drumming louder than the quiet hum of Marcus's refrigerator. When I finally tapped the full thread open, 10 messages, maybe fewer, but everyone was heavy. It was his sister. The same sister who had once voted in that cruel family poll about how long I'd last. The one who typed, "If she gets pregnant, game over. Don't be stupid." Now she was reaching out. She confessed that the group chat was real, but only part of the story. She claimed their mother had orchestrated it all, pulling strings the way she always had, teaching her children to treat women as accessories, not equals. She wrote that she went along with it to keep peace, that her words hadn't been her own, but borrowed cruelty passed down like family recipes. At first, I wanted to laugh, excuses dressed as apologies. But then she offered proof. Screenshots, not from the group this time, but from private DMs between my husband and his cousin. And they were worse. She's getting suspicious. Better plant the baby now. If she's pregnant, she'll stay. No way she leaves with a kid. She's useful as long as she's loyal. Keep her dumb. The words cut sharper because they were stripped of laughter. No emojis, no group dynamic, just strategy. Cold, clinical. I set the phone down on the table and pressed my palms over my face. My husband hadn't been swept up in a toxic family joke. He wasn't a passive victim of manipulation. He had been an active architect. The baby inside me wasn't just a child to him, it was a tactic. Across the room, Marcus watched quietly. He didn't press, didn't demand I share what was on my screen. When I finally handed it over, he scrolled slowly, his face unreadable. Calculated, he murmured. This isn't impulse. This is intent. I nodded, but my throat was too tight to answer. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the guest bed, eyes wide open, one hand resting lightly over my stomach. Not crying, just still. I thought about the word trap again. They believed I was the one being trapped. But lying there in the dark, I understood he was the one caged. Every message, every transaction, every plan. They were the bars he built around himself. All I had to do was stop rattling them. The next morning, I didn't answer his calls. He left a voicemail that lasted 12 minutes. He said my name over and over, like a broken prayer. He didn't mention the chat, didn't mention his family, just himself and how empty the bed was without me. It should have hurt. It didn't. Later, another email arrived from his sister. She wrote, I have more if you want them. You deserve the whole truth. I told her to send them. She did. Screenshots, dates, conversations that painted a picture I already suspected, but now couldn't deny. My husband had been managing me like a business strategy, checking off milestones, affection routine, obedience, pregnancy, every step measured, every word recorded, and suddenly every memory warped under the weight of hindsight. The way he insisted on certain habits, the way he discouraged me from therapy, the way he laughed when I suggested going back to school. None of it was random. None of it was neutral. It was all design. That night, I sat at Marcus's kitchen table long after he went to bed. I spread the screenshots in front of me like puzzle pieces. The rescue dog comment, the Thanksgiving photo, the pregnancy strategy. Side by side, they told a story more devastating than any single betrayal. It wasn't just that he didn't love me. It was that he had studied me, charted me, and used me. At 3 a.m, I whispered into the empty room. He never saw me as a person. And the silence that followed wasn't painful. It was clarifying. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just leaving him. I wasn't just divorcing him. I was burying the version of myself they thought they knew. The loyal girl, the gullible wife, the dumb one who stayed. She was gone. And what would rise in her place was someone they never prepared for. Someone who could burn everything down without striking a single match. I folded the screenshots back into their folder and placed it neatly on the table. Marcus found me there an hour later, eyes raw but dry. He poured coffee, sat across from me, and asked, "What's the plan?" I looked him dead in the eye. We let him choke on silence. Then we take everything else. And for the first time since this began, I felt steady. Because I wasn't their punchline anymore. I was the ending they never saw coming. The first step wasn't emotional. It was paperwork. Marcus and I spent an entire Saturday at the bank, signatures echoing in the sterile quiet of the glass cubicles. I closed our joint checking account, moved half into a secure personal one I had already opened. The banker tried to hide her curiosity behind polite professionalism, but I could feel her eyes flicking between us. Me steady, Marcus calm, the folder on the desk heavy with documents. Every click of a pen, every initial beside a line felt like reclaiming something I hadn't even realized I'd lost. Control. That afternoon, we filed requests to freeze his access to certain assets. Legally, airtight, Marcus said. Bulletproof. It wasn't revenge, it was protection. At night, back in the quiet of Marcus's apartment, I listened to my husband's voicemails stack up. The tone shifted daily. Some were pathetic, pleading, sobbing, begging for forgiveness. Some were angry, sharp, defensive, spitting blame at me for tearing us apart. Others were nostalgic, reminiscing about early dates, inside jokes, soft moments that I couldn't even recognize anymore. He cycled through personas like a drowning man, grabbing at driftwood, but none of them reached me. Because the one thing he never said was the only thing that mattered. I'm sorry for what I did. Instead, he said things like, I don't know why I said those things. It was just words. My mom pushed me. It didn't mean anything. But words mean everything. Words are choices. Words are masks that slip when you think no one's looking. And he had chosen them over and over for years. Marcus reminded me of that every time doubt threatened to creep in. Look at the evidence, he'd say, tapping the stack of screenshots and statements. Not the voice messages, the evidence. So I did, and each time the numbness returned, steadying me. One evening, as I sorted through the papers, I found the mortgage agreement, the one he'd convinced me to sign in my name alone. Back then, he told me it was for taxes that my credit was better. I thought it was love. Now I realize it was leverage. But leverage works both ways. The house was mine. Legally, cleanly, undeniably mine. He couldn't touch it. I laughed then, a sound that startled me. It wasn't bitter. It was sharp alive. For once, one of his manipulations had boomeranged back in my favor. The next morning, I filed to secure the title. Marcus helped draft the forms. He can't contest it, he said simply. He signed it away years ago. His mistake. Mistake. The word tasted good. Meanwhile, my husband's attempts grew more frantic. Emails with subject lines like, please just talk to me. We can fix this. Don't throw it all away. He attached photos, us at the beach, us at weddings, us in hotel rooms smiling at the camera. Proof of memories he wanted me to believe still mattered. But every image looked counterfeit now, like staged propaganda from a life I didn't trust. I didn't reply. Instead, Marcus and I drafted another letter, this one to his employer. A simple request for employment verification signed with my legal counsel's name. No explanation, no accusations, just enough to plant the seed. By the time he opened that envelope at work, I imagine his stomach must have dropped. The uncertainty, the paranoia, wondering what I would do next. That was the point. We didn't need fireworks. Silence was louder. At night, I lay awake with one hand over my stomach, feeling the faintest swell, beginning to press against my waistband. The baby. The life he thought would chain me. Instead, it was sharpening me, turning me into someone stronger. I whispered into the dark, I won't let them win. And for the first time, I believed it. A week later, another knock came at Marcus's door. Not him this time. His mother. Beige trench coat, perfect makeup, lips pressed into a thin line of judgment. She didn't even flinch when Marcus opened the door. She looked past him, her eyes finding me like a hawk spotting prey. We need to talk, she said. I didn't move. Marcus stood firm in the doorway. You don't understand what you're doing, she continued. Families have disagreements. Things get said. You don't tear everything apart because of a few words. A few words? I thought of the hundreds of screenshots stacked in Marcus's folder. The polls, the photos, the strategies, a few words. She lowered her voice, as if that made her venom sound like reason. If you're going to leave, at least do it with grace. Don't drag him through the mud. Don't take everything just to prove a point. That's not fair to him. Fair. As if fairness had ever been on the table when they laughed at me like a party trick. I didn't respond. Marcus's hand tightened on the door. Her eyes flicked to my stomach, then a small, knowing smirk twisting her mouth. You'll regret this when the baby comes, she said. You'll need help then. That was when I spoke finally. Just one sentence. I'd rather raise this child alone than let them think cruelty is normal. Her smirk faltered. Marcus shut the door. The elevator dinged, carrying her away. I stood in the silence that followed, hand on my stomach, again pulse steady. Because this wasn't just paperwork anymore. It wasn't just strategy. It was war. Her knock still echoed in my head long after the elevator swallowed her. That sound, that sharp, entitled rhythm, wasn't just a mother looking for her son. It was a matriarch checking on her property. Because that's how she had always seen me, not as a person, not even as her son's partner, but as an object to be managed upon to keep the family's image neat and controlled. Marcus poured me tea afterward, chamomile steaming in the mug, steadying my hands. You did well, he said. I shook my head. I barely said anything. Exactly. He set the mug in front of me. Silence unnerves people who thrive on control. She wanted you rattled. You gave her nothing. But the truth was, inside I was rattled. Because her words had stuck like burrs. You'll regret this when the baby comes. Regret. That was their favorite weapon. They had mocked me for being dumb, loyal, naive. But regret that was supposed to be my leash. A constant whisper. You'll come crawling back. You'll need us one day. Not this time. That night, I replayed the encounter in my head. The way she'd smirked at my stomach, already framing my child as part of her power play. The audacity of it boiled through me. She wasn't just defending her son. She was laying claim to my future. And I realized something chilling. This wasn't just his betrayal. It was generational. Learned, practiced, perfected. The cruelty in those messages wasn't random family banter. It was a tradition. I remember dinners at their house, the little digs dressed as jokes. She talks too much when she's nervous. She should really eat less bread. She's lucky you married her. I used to laugh it off, convincing myself they were just blunt, just teasing. But now I saw them for what they were: rehearsals, testing boundaries, seeing how much humiliation I would swallow before choking. And I had swallowed a lot. Marcus found me pacing at midnight, hand pressed against my chest like I was holding myself together. You're thinking too loud, he said softly. She thinks she owns it, I whispered. The baby, my life, me. She thinks I'll crawl back for help. Marcus leaned against the doorframe. That's what tyrants always think, that their rule is eternal, until it isn't. The next day I started preparing in earnest. Not just legal paperwork. Psychological warfare. I gathered everything into neat packages, the screenshots, the private messages, the bank transfers, the burner confession from his sister. Marcus helped organize them into binders labeled indexed, impossible to dismiss as rumor or exaggeration. Each binder was a mirror ready to reflect their cruelty back at them. When my husband emailed me again this time, attaching a folder titled Truth, filled with voice memos of him crying, I didn't respond. I just added it to the file. Evidence of a man who could perform grief without ever confessing guilt. Meanwhile, his sister tried again. Another burner account, another apology. She said she was on my side now that she wanted to help me bring their mother down. I blocked her. Because anyone who once voted on my worth, like a reality show contestant, didn't get a second audition. The family machine was sputtering. I could feel it. The matriarch had sensed it too. That's why she came to Marcus's apartment. She thought intimidation would keep the gears turning. But she underestimated me. I wasn't a cog anymore. I was the wrench. And she didn't know it yet, but I had already chosen my next move. I decided I would not scream. I would not post the screenshots online, would not torch their reputations in a fiery viral scandal. That would be too easy, too short-lived. No, my strategy was quieter, more enduring. I wanted them to rot slowly in their own silence, the way they once laughed in mine. One evening, Marcus found me staring at the ultrasound photo again. My thumb brushed over the faint blur of a future I hadn't expected, but now felt fiercely protective of. You're thinking of them, he said. I'm thinking of her, I admitted. His mother. The way she looked at me, like she already knew the ending. Marcus shook his head. That's the thing about people like her. They believe they write everyone's story. But the truth is, he tapped the ultrasound photo gently. You hold the pen now. That night, I dreamt of her face twisting when she realized she'd lost control. The next morning, I woke up lighter. Because she could knock all she wanted. She could smirk, she could threaten, she could whisper about regret. But the reality was simple. I had already slipped from her grip, and soon I would show her what it feels like to watch a pawn become the queen. 3 weeks after her visit, I filed. No warning, no explanation. Just crisp signatures on heavy paper, notarized and stamped with finality. The divorce petition wasn't emotional. It was transactional, clinical, a scalpel cutting through rot. I had the documents delivered to his office, not his house. Marcus suggested it. He said, let the professional world see the truth before his family can spin it. I agreed. Clipped to the top of the petition was the ultrasound photo. A heartbeat printed in black and white. Beneath it, in my handwriting, your son's legacy. He called 6 times that day. I didn't answer. His voicemails piled up, half-broken sobs, half accusations. How could you do this? We were starting a family. Doesn't that mean anything? It meant everything, just not with him. I didn't go back to our house. Instead, I moved into a small apartment across town, the kind with peeling paint and a squeaky elevator. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, clean, untouched by their laughter. Only Marcus knew the address. The house, though our house, the one legally in my name, I didn't abandon. I cleaned it out and rented it to a woman going through her own divorce. A single mom with 2 kids. She cried when I handed her the keys. Her little girl ran through the living room, laughing under the same spot where I had once taped their words. If she gets pregnant, game over. Now that room echoed with a child's joy, not their mockery. That was better justice than fire. Meanwhile, Marcus leaked just enough evidence to his employer. Not the whole chat yet, just enough to raise alarms. HR called it reputation risk. They opened an investigation. When the rest of the messages landed on their desk, his career crumbled. He wasn't fired for cruelty. They don't have a box for that on termination forms. He was fired for stupidity, for forwarding polls about his wife from his company email, for dragging colleagues into his humiliation circus. Inappropriate use of company resources, they called it. The cousin didn't fare better. He had been angling for a promotion in a local government office. A quiet email containing select screenshots reached the right inbox. His name didn't survive the month. The family network that had once mocked me over dinner was unraveling thread by thread, and I didn't even need to touch the weave. All I had to do was slide the truth into the light and step back. His sister tried again. More messages, more apologies. She claimed she was on my side, that she wanted to expose their mother fully. I blocked her. Because forgiveness isn't currency to be traded when the ship is already sinking. Through it all, I stayed quiet. I didn't rage on social media. I didn't send threats. I let them stew in silence, let them imagine what I might do next. That was the punishment. Not knowing. Waiting. Every time he emailed, I archived it. Every voicemail I let expire. He wanted noise, shouting, crying, anything he could fight against. But I gave him nothing. Just a quiet absence that grew louder each day. At night, I sat in my apartment, hand on my stomach, feeling the faint rhythm beneath my skin. The life he thought would chain me was the very thing setting me free. Because this child would never learn love through mockery, never grow up believing cruelty was normal. I would raise them differently. Not in a house wallpapered with humiliation, but in a home where truth wasn't a weapon. One evening, Marcus asked if I ever wanted to send the messages to his mother directly. Let her see her empire burn in her own hands. I shook my head. She already knows. That's why she came here. She felt it slipping. She just doesn't want to admit she's lost. Because the final strike wasn't exposure. It wasn't even divorce. The final strike was leaving quietly, with everything they thought I was too dumb to protect: my dignity, my house, my child. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't begged. I hadn't played their game. And that silence was louder than any explosion could have been. By the time the ink dried on the papers, he was unemployed, disgraced, and still living with the mother who had orchestrated it all. She had won him back, but she hadn't won me. And she never would again. Pregnancy changes everything. At least that's what they said in the group chat. To them, it was leverage. To me, it was clarity. I decided early I would keep the baby. Not because of him, not for his family, but for me. For this life that deserved better than to be born into a cage of manipulation. Every morning, I pressed my palm to my stomach, whispering promises into the quiet. You won't grow up learning that love means cruelty. You won't see your worth debated in a group chat. You will know peace before you know betrayal. The more I whispered, the stronger I felt. I wasn't naive. I knew single motherhood would be hard. Sleepless nights, bills, daycare, exhaustion. But I also knew this anything was easier than living one more day in a house wallpapered with humiliation. So I reclaimed what was mine. The house, still in my name. I rented it to that single mom and her kids, turning it from a stage for cruelty into a sanctuary. Every time she paid her reduced rent, she thanked me. But she didn't understand I was thanking her. She was filling the walls with laughter, scrubbing away the poison. The money secured. Every account he once tried to siphon from was locked. Every dollar I earned was mine again. No more hidden transfers, no more silent betrayals in banking apps. My time, my own. I no longer waited for his approval, no longer planned dinners he'd mock behind my back, no longer rehearsed excuses for his absence. My calendar was mine, every hour shaped by my own hands. And my voice, the one they had tried to train into silence, was sharper now. Not loud, not screaming, but steady. When people asked how I was doing, I said, better. And I meant it. Friends started noticing. A colleague once said, you look lighter. She didn't know the weight I had set down, the years of manipulation, the invisible leash of loyalty. Marcus noticed too. One night, as we boxed up more of my old belongings, he said, you're not the same woman who called me crying weeks ago. I'm not, I admitted, and I smiled, because that was the point. Meanwhile, his family was unraveling. His mother tried to spin the story, but whispers have a way of curdling. Neighbors who once invited them to barbecues now kept their distance. His sister's half-hearted apologies fell flat. His cousin's career crumbled under the weight of his own words. And him, he withered. I didn't see it firsthand, but mutual friends told me. He'd moved back in with his mother. He walked like a man missing parts of himself. They said he drank more. They said he looked haunted. Good. Let him live with the ghost he created. Because I wasn't haunted anymore. I was building. I decorated the new apartment with small, steady joys, thrifted curtains, a rocking chair by the window, a bookshelf filled with novels I hadn't let myself read in years. Marcus bought me a soft lamp for the nursery corner. I painted the walls pale yellow, a color that caught the morning light. Every stroke of paint felt like rewriting the story. Every nail hammered into the wall felt like staking my claim on a new life. This was reclamation, not dramatic revenge, not explosive confrontation, quiet daily victories. The day I signed the final divorce papers, I felt no urge to celebrate with champagne or fireworks. Instead, I walked to the park near my apartment and sat on a bench watching children play. I rested my hand on my stomach and whispered, "We're free." It was the truest thing I'd said in years. For a long time, I thought freedom meant leaving him. But now I understood it wasn't about him at all. It was about reclaiming myself. The version of me that laughed without fear of being mocked. The version of me that believed in her own intelligence, her own worth. I had been buried under their words. Now I was unearthing myself piece by piece. And this baby, their so-called trap, wasn't a chain. They were my compass pointing me forward. I didn't forgive him. I never will. Forgiveness is a gift, and he had never earned it. What I gave myself instead was distance. And distance can be stronger than forgiveness ever will. The last time he tried to reach me, he sent a video. He sat on our old bed, my side of it, clutching a pillow like a lifeline. He cried, begged, whispered my name like it was the only word left in his vocabulary. I watched it once, then I deleted it, because I wasn't his audience anymore. He had lost that privilege the moment he called me a rescue dog, the moment he plotted my pregnancy like a strategy. Now the only person I answered to was myself and the small life growing inside me. This wasn't just survival, it was reclamation. And I was winning. A month after the divorce, papers were delivered, I mailed a package. No return address. Just a padded envelope with his name written in neat, steady handwriting. The same hand he used to call girlish when I made grocery lists. Inside, I placed 4 items. First, a USB drive. It held every screenshot from the Keeping Her Dumb chat. Every poll, every insult, every photograph of me they passed around like a joke. It was indexed and organized Marcus's handiwork. He could never claim I twisted anything, never accuse me of exaggeration. His cruelty was archived permanent. Second, a copy of the mortgage agreement. My name alone printed at the top, his signature at the bottom. Proof that the house he once mocked me for decorating, for cooking in, for laughing inside was mine. Proof that his mother's prediction she'll stay if she's pregnant had crumbled into dust. I hadn't stayed. I had taken the walls with me. Third, the ultrasound photo. Grainy and gray, but unmistakable. A life forming. The very thing they once voted on, like a strategy game. The heartbeat they mocked had already rewritten my story. And last, a letter. Handwritten because I wanted him to feel every word as ink pressed into paper. You were right. I was loyal. But you were wrong. I wasn't dumb. I just loved you. That was my only mistake. I sealed the package and dropped it into a mailbox on a quiet street. The clang of the metal door shutting was the cleanest sound I'd ever heard. Weeks later, I heard from a mutual friend that he'd moved back in with his mother. They said he wandered the neighborhood like a shadow, shoulders bent, eyes hollow. They said he didn't laugh anymore. That he barely spoke. That he looked like a man who forgot how to hold his own name. Good. Let his mother keep him. She had earned it. Because in the end, she hadn't stolen me. She had stolen him. She molded him into someone who believed cruelty was power, who thought control was love. She wanted him loyal to her, and she got it. He belonged to her now, not me, not our child. I never saw him again. I never heard his voice except in the old voicemails I refused to play. He faded into silence, and for once, silence didn't belong to me. It belonged to him. As for me, I began again. My apartment filled slowly with new sounds. The hum of a rocking chair, the rustle of baby clothes being folded into drawers, the quiet tap of my own laughter returning in small doses. I kept the house not as a home, but as a reminder. I didn't move back in. I let the single mom I'd rented to stay. Sometimes, when I dropped by to fix a leak or change an air filter, her kids ran down the hallway laughing loud enough to shake the walls. Their joy covered the last of the stains his words had left. One evening, I sat on my couch, hand resting over my stomach, watching the sun dip behind the city skyline. I thought about everything, about the girl I had been when I said I do, about the woman who wallpapered her house, and betrayal, about the mother I was becoming. I thought about the group chat, about their smug certainty that I'd never leave. And I smiled because they had underestimated me in the most dangerous way. They mistook love for weakness. But love, real love, the kind I had for myself now, and for the child I carried, wasn't weakness. It was armor. And I wore it well. So if you ask me how it ended, I'll tell you this. It ended with silence. Not mine. His. It ended with me walking away with everything they thought I'd never have: the house, the dignity, the child, the future. It ended with a package and a letter. It ended with me whispering to the life inside me, "We are free. We are enough. We are ours." And it ended with a truth I carry like a shield. I wasn't the dumb one. I was the ending they never saw coming. Thanks for staying with me through this journey, betrayal, truth, and reclaiming power. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. The next story may hit even closer to home.